As far as I know, Val just asks people if they would like to read, and if they agree, she just gives them the text, and that's it. Val doesn't tell you how to read, whether you should read slowly or quickly, happily or sadly, what kind of emotion you should use. Val doesn't do any of this. It's up to you as the reader, based upon how you're feeling on a particular morning, based on your interpretation of the text. And I suppose it's also up to the listener, how we are hearing you, what we're feeling. All these things go into the experience of reading aloud. Every Christmas, students at Trinity Lutheran Elementary School in Waconia, Minnesota, have a Christmas program. And in the early weeks of December, they practice and practice and practice for hours and hours and hours every school day. And unlike Val, the teachers at Trinity Lutheran Elementary School just assign you a reading. Or at least they did in the mid-90s. They didn't ask you what you wanted to read, they just gave it to you and you had to read. So you would practice, and then also unlike Val, the teachers would give you feedback on how you were doing. And it was especially difficult to get the kids to care or to read well, especially the middle school boys. I think what they cared about most was just making their voices sound as low as possible. The time came for the baby to be born, and Mary gave birth to a son and wrapped him in swaddling cloths and placed him in the manger. Danny, you have to open your mouth. Enunciate, okay, and you need to slow down, so we're going to try it again. The time came for the baby to be born, and Mary gave birth to a son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes. And Danny kept reading like this, and the teachers kept correcting him, but Danny stuck to it, even the night of the program, the same way always. I don't know if he really cared, but to his credit, he read exactly what was assigned to him. He said all the words. And that's not even clear with our reading this morning. The bulletin says that the reading is from John's 5th chapter, verses 1 through 11. And if you're reading along, verse 1, verse 2, verse 3, where's verse 4? If you're reading from a fancy, sophisticated Bible, edited by scholars at the fanciest universities, you will see that there is a footnote next to verse 4. And the footnote explains that though verse 4 is striking, it is not found in the best manuscripts, and its wording in Greek is unlike the rest of the Gospel of John. Therefore, it was probably not originally a part of the Gospel. So what about verse 4? We didn't tell Edie whether or not to read it. Edie is theologically trained. She's been a churchgoer her whole life, a church leader, so I was eager to see her take on it, and she did the safe thing. She read it, and then she read the footnote. But what about verse 4? Well, this whole story is about a pool. A pool. Pools seem significant. A hotel with a pool is better than a hotel without a pool. A house with a pool is better than a house without a pool. A house that is on Lake Minnetonka that also has a pool, well, that's quite the house. I know that some people in our congregation live on Lake Minnetonka, and I think some people in our congregation have pools, but I'm not sure if we have anybody who lives on Lake Minnetonka and has a pool. But if you know someone like this, invite them to our church immediately. So our story is about a pool. And we tend to think of certain people hanging out at pools. Maybe we are on Lake Minnetonka, and maybe there is a pool in the backyard. And maybe someone has just finished up a day of work, making deals, making trades, performing surgeries. They're reclining at the pool, they've got their martini, they're checking their portfolio on their phone. This might be what we think of when someone is hanging out by the pool. But the people hanging out at the pool in our story today are much different than this. They don't work at all. They're invalids. They're afflicted, disabled, sick. The main character in our story has been hanging out at the pool for 38 years, and it's not because he's particularly deserving of this rest and relaxation. It's because he has nowhere else to go. He's sick and he can't move. But then there is that little detail about verse 4. And apparently, as the footnote indicates, this little detail is of lesser credibility, but it's kind of a fun little detail. So the poor, the weak, the disabled, the afflicted, they are all hanging out at the pool because, according to verse 4, an angel of the Lord will come down at various parts of the season, stir up the water, and whomever gets to the water first is healed. Now that's troubling for a few reasons. One being that whomever could get to the water first would seem the person who is least in need of being healed. But still, it's a good little detail. It's interesting. It sounds like a contest. Maybe a bit like that contest they had at the hockey game in South Dakota a couple months ago. Did you hear about that news story? During a break in the action, they invited local teachers out onto the ice. And teachers don't make very much money, and I don't think schools in South Dakota are particularly well funded. So the organizers of this event had pillowcases filled with dollar bills. And they told the teachers to get down on their hands and knees, and they dumped the dollar bills onto the ice. And the teachers were told to grab as many dollar bills as they could. And any dollar bills that they got could be contributed to their classrooms. And the people watched and they laughed at the desperation of these teachers. And I wonder if maybe the same thing was happening in our Bible story today. If the healthy people next to the pool with their martinis after a long day of performing surgery would look at the poor, sick people desperately moving towards the pool and laugh. And maybe verse 4 was left out because this is such a terrible thing to laugh at. So verse 4 may not be authentic to John's gospel, but it seems authentic to our world. It's got the makings of a great reality TV show, I think. The angel of the Lord, looking a bit like that guy who hosts Survivor, takes his spirit stick and he stirs up the water. And then all the contestants have to elbow and scrape and bite and scratch and curse, and they fight their way. And the first one to the water gets the cash prize, the healing. It could be a reality TV show. We could call it In Deep Water. Maybe TNT would pick it up. They love reality TV shows. They could air it right after that new reality TV show they have going. It's called Rat in the Kitchen. It's about 6 chefs cooking together. One of them is trying to sabotage all the other chefs. I don't think our premise here is any stupider than that. So maybe people would watch this. Of course, Jesus would be in the reality TV show, and they could pull right from the gospel for the script. Do you hear what Jesus asks the man in the story today? Do you want to be made well? He sounds like the host of a reality TV show, asking the obvious. Do you want to be made well? Look into the camera and tell America how much you want this. And our man says, yes, of course I want to be made well. But then the camera scans out and we see the rest of him. And his arms and his legs are bent and twisted in unfathomable directions. And it is clear why he cannot make it to the water. This is not a question of willingness or gumption. He could never move. But still, he's been on In Deep Water for 38 seasons. He's a fan favorite. He never wins, but he's there every year. He doesn't give up hope. He's a fan favorite. And the showrunners have determined that this 39th season, he's going to get the reward. They design it so that he gets to the water first. He's healed. He gets the cash prize. Everything changes. His arms are straightened. His legs are straightened. We never knew how tall he was. He'd always just been there lying on the ground. He might be 6'3" now, and he's good looking. perhaps a spin-off series. It's a great story, if you look at it this way. You can think about how a showrunner could manufacture this to fit the narratives we know. How this man never gave up hope. He stayed by the water every year, even when he knew he could never get there. He still reached and reached and reached. This can fit into the familiar stories that we've heard before about perseverance and hard work. And now the return has come to the man. It's happening to him. He's healed. He got the money. He got his own house. There's a pool in the backyard. He can go in and out of that whenever he likes. He even has a book deal for a memoir. It's a familiar story. It fits into the stories that we have encountered in our lesser lives. People who have persevered and kept working and gotten their return. Or conversely, people who just gave up, quit trying, and continued lying on the ground. So we can make this a tale about perspiration and hard work. But if our man, the invalid, had gotten that book deal, and if he had appeared on the morning talk shows, and if the hosts were asking him to tell his story, leaning in so we could hear his story and apply it to our own lives. Tell us, they would say. How have you done it? How did you do it? How are you better? Was it a workout regimen? Was it prayer? Was it a diet? Paleo? South Beach? Atkins? What was it? They would say. But our man, he wouldn't go along with this. Everyone would be looking at him, and he would just shrug. I don't know. A man made me well. He just said, take up your mat and walk. And so I did. That's it. And so I did. And we walk and walk and walk. All the years in this place, all the accomplishments, all your lives, all the things you have done. I've gotten to be your pastor for a year, and I've learned so much about you. And every person's story here is fascinating, worthy of admiration. You have done wonderful things, and people will want to know about everything you have done, and you should tell them. But you'll need to figure out, while you're telling them, whether you've walked so far that you've forgotten the one who made you stand up in the first place. Someone else nursed you while you slept. Someone else healed you while you were sick. Someone else fashioned your body and mind and spirit to make you able to do all the things that you have done. Our man remembered this. Can you remember it? Amen.